Welcome back to Dynamic Character Productions. We are covering our second long game, Monte Carlo, episodes 9 and 10. I am your host, Alex Trias, and I have two great guests here with me today. Our first guest is another member of Prod. You also saw him on Exile Island. It's our boy, John. You fucked us, Millsip. John, how are you doing?
I am doing great, Alex. We have a phenomenal cast for Monte Carlo this season. It's been such a delight rewatching them play this game again, and I'm excited to help break it down tonight.
That's fantastic. And also the person below me, you saw him on our last mini, Sahara Dunes. He was the mayor of Ponderosa. Everyone thought he was an evil genius mastermind of the game, but really he had no clue what was going on. It was Sean Hunter. Sean, how you doing?
I am fantastic. I'd like you all to know I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here and I'm excited that I was invited to chat with you all this evening.
Yeah, we are lucky to have you here, Sean. So let's start this breakdown. We're going into episode 9, Flip the Vote. Honestly, they were like shorter episodes, but a lot of meat on the bone with both of them. So we can't cover everything, but we're going to try to hit the main strokes here. So it's now confirmed, Will's Titus Alliance is somehow Mike, Kiley, and Connor, even though the rest of them don't know that. Love that for him.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Will started off the game on a rough foot.
Oh, yeah.
And, getting caught up in the whole Nick Cannon of it all. And it's great that he was able to survive to this long, but he has these quick bonds with Mike, Kiley, and Connor, but we'll see how that ends up for him.
Well, we see how it ends up. Spoiler alert, because you guys should have watched the episodes already. Will, just like his counterpart, Nick Cannon, and, in true to Nick Cannon, was wild and out these two episodes. But he does, his premise of him being on the bottom Ruken for so long, I feel like blinded some of his game where he was just everyone he was targeting was an OG Ruken. But he was if it wasn't Parker, it was going to be Margaret. If it wasn't going to be Margaret, it was going to be Michael. These are all the people that was they were preventing me from playing the game. So I'm going after all of them, hitting my own kind. Sean, you were on a season where you didn't want to do that. You're what? Why would we change sides? Let's just roll the dice. Let's just keep it where it is, the status quo. It's a weird predicament to be in.
You just want to stick with your team, when you are picked sides in school, one group go to one side of the gym, one group to the other. It's ride or die. I would take a dodgeball in the head for this person beside me. So I like seeing that. That makes me happy. Just teamwork makes the dream work, as they say.
Yeah, but it only works if the rest of your tribe's going along with it too. And we're 3 votes into a merge here now, and it's not going so well for someone who wants to stick with Ruken.
Yeah, but so we go to that person now who is now officially on the bottom lane, Margaret, who's finally having this realization that they took away everything from me. All my 2 main alliance members, they're both on the jury. Now, what am I supposed to do? I now have to play, not play the game, because she was playing the game. But now she's I'm going to put my emotions to the side and just play the field. I'm going to stir stuff up because I know if I don't win, I'm most likely going home. So I sort of like this approach from her, whereas was it a little messy and maybe she could have done a couple things better that could have ultimately saved her? Sure. But for someone who didn't play the game before, I felt like she had the right approach and idea of say yes to both sides, but see how they talk to you.
Yeah, I really like seeing this from Margaret here because she finds herself in a position where she needs to adapt. She's in a forced adaptation spot where if she doesn't adapt to the game that's happening around her, it's just going to leave her behind. So when she says, no, that's it, I'm playing this game for me now, it's that moment that some players just have too late when they're playing, where people are so focused on playing for the team or playing for a close ally to protect someone. We've seen someone like Kiley has gone to bat for Mike over and over and over again, where maybe there was a time earlier in the season where it made more sense for Kiley just to drop that connection she had with Mike beforehand and ride it out differently and adapt. Margaret's now in a spot where she's forced to adapt because the people she was going to bat for are no longer in the game. And unfortunately, it just comes just that little bit too late for it to really pay off for her.
I guess the dangerous part too of being a passenger when you're playing Survivor, which is something I got caught up with. You got to drive the bus at some point. And if you're kind of forced into driving the bus when there's no one else on the bus, you might crash and burn.
I just loved her confession where she was like, you could have just leave me one of them and I would just stayed out of your way. Like, I would just been having fun with my friend. You go play the game and you can take us out later. Like, but you took both of them away from me. So now I'm going to come at your throat. And I was like, oh, I like this. I want to see what happens. I'm so sad. Like, love Michael, but it would have been fun to see this version of Margaret get a couple more rounds under her belt to see what could happen. But ultimately, the king and queen of wanting Margaret out, Jonathan and Victoria, were setting everything up to ensure that didn't happen. We get this great reveal from Jonathan in his conversation with Victoria about, like, I played a mini format before. Like, I played these breakout rooms. This is exactly how you're supposed to play, and this is why I played it to a T. And he's putting a lot of trust now in Victoria. Like, I think he's now starting to, like, get past what happened in the pre-merge. And it's like, Victoria's a ride or die for me now, and like a very loyal ally to have. So I'm now going to be more willing to give information and this is why everything happened the way it did. This is why you didn't need to play your idol. This is why we now have Michael in this 3, which is like, we're getting so many new alliances these 2 episodes. Like, it's so much fun to finally see. There's no pagonging, there's no reverse pagonging. Like, there's these new fluid relationships forming, which I just find so exciting in a post-merge game.
Yeah, I mean, you always dream when you're watching Survivor to see these type of fluid relationships happening. And it's so nice seeing Jonathan position himself in a place where he has this connection with Victoria. He's used that connection to form a connection with Michael, and is just starting to pull people in around him to kind of sculpt things into how he's wanting things done here, with, getting Margaret out here, who he kind of views as someone who's just socially dangerous in this spot. Rightfully so, because I think if Margaret survives this vote, she ends up going a lot further in this game.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think she's the type of person, like, if you didn't get her out the moment that you needed to get her out, it's sort of like what Kiley was trying to explain about herself in the episode 10, where she was like, if I don't go here, like, why would they be going after me versus these other people that appear more dangerous than I am? Like, everyone knows I have a good social game, but why would they do it? It's sort of similar for Margaret in that instance. So it's like, only one could survive ultimately. A couple other points I had before we get to the immunity challenge. I love that Mike has like his own theme music. Every single time his confessional comes up, you get that the cheesy mob boss music in the background, and it takes me away every time, where I have to go back and re-listen to the confessional because I'm like too much in the zone of the music and thinking of like, oh, what would Mike look like if he was like in a cheap mob movie?
It's perfectly, in my opinion.
Oh, it's just great because it's sort of like he wanted to be the villain, so give him the music. And I love that it's just him like, I can't believe these people let me survive a round like this where I could have no protection. They could just blindsided the hell out of me, but no, I'm still here, and that's their problem now. Then we get one from McKenna, which I like because it's sort of her saying, like, this is the first time where I feel like I've had power in the game. And boy, do we see it coming up. But it's also that she's starting to feel like she has power. And at the same exact time, we're now starting to hear people be like, oh, McKenna's a threat. Like, McKenna's someone who needs to go. Like, she's very good socially. She's not winning competition, but like, because of how well integrated she is within the remaining players, everyone's starting to be like, so how do we get her out? And it's just, I love that we have such like a wide field at this point in the game.
Yeah, it really feels like she has her hand in the cookie jar in a bunch of groups almost. And that's like a really good way to play, right? If you're kind of in with a bunch of people and everyone's like, yeah, like we'll bring McKenna along, or we'll trust her decisions, listen to what she has to say, rather than just be solely forced into one alliance, kind of being a part of each of them.
Yeah, it can be great, but as John can also shed some light to, like, it also can become very dangerous very fast. The more cookie jars you're trying to put one hand in, eventually the hand getting stuck.
Yeah. What I really liked about this confessional for McKenna, though, is I really love how it just parallels the exact same story we're getting from Margaret in this episode, where at the same times we have these two very strong social players kind of realizing now's the time they need to make moves. Now's the time where they have to capitalize on their position in the game if they want to survive further. And then we kind of see how they both handle it in different ways, with one of them ultimately coming out on top.
Yeah. And I think that's enough about this. Let's get into the immunity challenge. It's Final 9. It's an endurance challenge. It's the 6 inches challenge. You have to be on your back, have your feet up 6 inches, can't go past the 2 cups that we have laid down. And it's who can keep them up longest. It's a lot of core. Even though people were saying their legs, it's core work, buddy. And honestly, people were talking about like time and like, oh, these people went out early, these people went out late. Like core, you could be doing it for 15 seconds and feel like it's been 30 minutes. Like it's no joke. How do you think you would have done in this, Sean?
Oh, me? I would have done absolutely horrible in this challenge. I've said it before in my other games. Like, guys, I am a very large, fat man. Like, core muscles, not my strength. This would have been a few seconds. I probably would have, like, just pushed long enough not to be the first person out and then been like, you know what? That's a moral victory at this point.
Yeah, not first out. That's your goal, eh? Asked me this like 8 years ago, I probably win when I was swimming and in shape. Today, do my best, see what happens. I don't know. Not promising anything. I also don't think I'd be the first one out, but I'm not promising any victories, unfortunately.
I do have some like behind the scenes with this challenge, though. As we were preparing for this challenge, we were talking in production that like this challenge would probably last like 2 minutes tops. The fact that Mike and Will were able to keep going more than 5 minutes is just so impressive.
Oh, well, yeah. And like Mike will say it himself, especially for Mike going 5 minutes. Like I was pretty much looking at the board and like, Will is most likely winning this. Like in just terms of like, he looked like he had the best chance of having core strength. I wouldn't know. I've only seen these people fully clothed, but he seemed to be the person I would have put my money on. Yeah, and same with you, Sean. I'm like, I could have done well in this when I was in high school and I was doing track, because like literally every single day, Monday through Friday, we would do ab workouts that lasted like a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes. So back then your boy was shredded. Right now, different type of six pack. But it's always also the nerves of someone who's had an athletic background of like, you can't be the first one out, especially if people have an impression of you, to be like, oh, you should at least do decent. You're like, oh, shit. Now I actually have to try. I had to like exert energy that I don't want to exert. And then like you feel it for days to come after. But Mike wins. He says he still feels it in his legs. I feel like he probably still feels it in his legs to this very day. But he's safe, and that does cause a little bit of chaos to happen, because when your boy who thinks he's going to go home every single round suddenly has safety, he's a little more willing to like, what's the fun thing to do? You know, like John, like you're a pretty analytical person. Like you're someone who's like, and you're someone who has won a crucial immunity before. Like it can cause you to get a little like not seeing the forest from the trees.
Yeah. When you win immunity, it gives you a lot of room to kind of flex a little bit more and like kind of push things a little harder, see how far it'll go before the battle breaks. But if you're not careful in this position and you push a little too hard for like a more chaotic outcome, it can really be detrimental to your game here. I feel like in this position, someone like Mike, who's had the target on him time and time again, has now won this very critical immunity challenge. Rather than trying to strong arm his will onto people, should kind of like feel like taking a step back here. Like, yes, you have the ability to strong arm people because it can't immediately fall back on you, but people don't have short memories in these games. People will remember this moment where you're kind of pushing for things to go a certain way the next time you don't have a necklace around your neck.
Yeah, like Sean, you've also been a victim to a plan that goes against you, like that you didn't see coming. Like, it's something that you don't. It's not something that you can say like will last forever, but it's something that you will remember at least for the portion of that game. And like, it's sort of how do you go about rewarding that person who takes you out just for the sake of them being like, well, we took you out because we could have taken the easy route, but you were the more fun person to eliminate.
Well, plus two, if you're the guy who is immune and you're making a big stink about it, like, haha, like, I'm not getting out. I'm going to say whatever I want. There's no repercussions currently, right? And yeah, as you said, people are going to remember that next time. Like, oh, hey, Sean, what did you say that last round? You were like trying to make things happen and kick everybody out. Oh, you're able to be kicked out this round. Yeah, see you later. So you do have to be careful. I think John has a really good point of kind of taking a back seat and seeing where things are going and kind of, pushing a little bit from behind the scenes to make it happen rather than be the front person to say, this is what I want. I'm immune. You're going to listen to me.
Yeah, and so we're going for this grand round. We're hearing this plan now start to come out, and Mike and Kiley and Will are sort of trying to spearhead it with the rest of the group, going like, what if we do this massive split? Instead of taking out Margaret, we blindside Michael, who in his confession was like, I really hope this plan doesn't go against me due to all this mess happening. They're like, us five are going to vote Michael, which is going to leave Jonathan and Connor in the dark. They're both going to still vote Margaret. And then there'd be like a straight vote from Margaret at Will or whatever. So you'll get like a 6-2-1 vote. Michael gets blindsided. And like on paper, that's all well and good. But I think what was really cool about the last week versus this week, last week we saw the rise of that trio of Will, Kiley, and Mike. But this week we see the rest of the group sort of being like, well, sure, they helped us get these two people out. We're not letting them continue to dictate this game. This is our game now. So we see OG Serpone really all minus Mike all come together. They clue in Michael. Like this is where Jonathan really starts amping up his gameplay. Just be like, Michael, I'm gonna be blunt with you. Like, this is what it is. They want you out. And you just see Michael go like, fuck, why? I love his exasperation. He's just like, what am I even doing that makes me this big target to them, other than being an OG Ruken, who was aligned with Andrew at some point. It's silly, but I love that like now it's this tug of war to see who is truly going to win this vote. Is Margaret going to go because Jonathan, Victoria, and McKenna get to control this game, or does Michael go and it shows that Mike, Kiley, and Will have control of this game? And so we get to tribal, we go through the vote, and it ends up being a 7-1-1 vote where Margaret leaves, and we have a straight vote where Mike votes for Jonathan, and then obviously Margaret votes for Will. Mike votes for Jonathan, I think, just out of spite because like they had this unwritten like truce or whatever, but because ultimately OG Serpone pushed their weight around to get their agenda done, we see this happen. And I love this like for first act of like official war amongst these two factions.
Yeah,
actually,
it's really fast.
It's
really fascinating that in the end, Michael doesn't end up getting a single vote at this tribal council, despite the fact that Kiley, Mike, and Will believe that they have these numbers to take out Michael. Like, they're evidently keyed in on the plan that like they don't have those numbers and that they have to vote Margaret here. before the tribal council happens, because Michael doesn't get these votes. Michael comes out without a single vote, is now solidified into this alliance with Jonathan Victoria, which we saw kind of form in the last episode. And now we're at this point where it's actually paying dividends here. The fact that Michael was able to get into a breakout room with Victoria and Jonathan during that short scramble period last episode has now paid off. Jonathan found Jonathan's social connections, therefore led to Michael knowing that he was the vote and knowing that he just had to stick strong with Margaret. He had to kind of take a leap of faith here, but in doing so, he's just solidified something so strong for himself.
Yeah, Sean, I know you said you wanted to bring something in.
Oh, I was just stressed for my boy Michael, my Sahara Dunes brother. That whole scramble, that whole like talking, it was hard to follow. There was a lot of plans in action. There was a lot of different routes, and my brain was kind of hurting after watching it. But I had a feeling that Margaret was going to go, but I was a little stressed for Michael. But yeah, as you said, he didn't get any votes, and his trust was definitely paid off with Jonathan. So worked out for him.
And you know what? Before we move forward, I do want to hear from someone who has played with Michael, forever, long or brief it was. But what are your thoughts on his game so far?
I mean, he's doing his thing. You know, he's lying in the weeds almost. Couple chaotic things here and there, but like he's just plugging along, and that's what he did in my season. He just skated along, almost made it to the final three, and he's just a guy you want to bring with the squad, especially once you get to the merge. He's just valuable to have around, and he sneaks under the radar a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like we do see Jonathan pull a lot of weight here, but we also see McKenna having a lot of this too, because she was in both plans and she said yes to both plans. Did she mean yes to both plans? No, but she's like, you always say yes in these things, even though you're just like, yeah, the Michael plan, I ain't about that life. Like, nah, I want him longer. It's just like Sean says, like they like having him around a lot. All of them see Michael in their end game. So we're now going to go into episode 10 of You're Going Home. And it's a weird one because we start instantly. Morgan's the first thing we see. And I was actually taken aback by that. I was like, oh, did McKenna make a mistake? Like, we're what's going on? And then it was like, oh, we're going straight into the challenge. And then I realized, like, oh, this is why we're starting with the challenge. So it's Liar's Dice, a confusing game all around for all that was involved, except for a few members of production. So each person rolls 3 dice. And we then recorded all the dice rolls, like all the numbers that were rolled. John, Ian, and myself were in a separate spreadsheet writing down everything that was rolled. From there, through random selection the first time, but then we had a process after. First person would make a bid. So you would make a bid like, I think there were 5 2s rolled. You could then challenge that claim or increase the bid. And you can only increase the bid by upping either the number of the dice that were rolled or the number of the die or the number on the die. So you could go from 5 2s to 5 3s, but you couldn't go from 5 2s to 4 3s. So the numbers always increased. If you won the challenge, you got to go first in the bidding war in the next round. If you lost the challenge, you lose one of your dice. Once you lose all 3 dice, you're removed from the game. So obviously it's a lot of direction. It was a new thing. We were just seeing if it was possible to be done. A very similar strategy happens in this game throughout it that I was just, for my part, was just very confused by. And it was, we would start with a bid and then immediately the next one would be like, oh, let's amp this up to the 6s. So I guess in some ways helped speed the game along a little bit because you only have a finite amount of things you can challenge after you go straight up to 6. But I was like, there's so much nuance to this game, so many more avenues you could go. And I honestly, for my opinion, I got a little bit bored with them choosing to just automatically go up to 6.
Yeah, I remember while we were filming this challenge, because like Alex said, Alex, Ian, and I were behind the scenes communicating with every single one of the contestants to figure out what number they had rolled on each of their dice, writing it down in the spreadsheet, counting up the numbers so we had them all in a spreadsheet so that when eventually someone did challenge, we could always be like, you're wrong or you're right. In fact, I totally forgot I was in this episode until watching it, and I all of a sudden heard my voice. But the strategy of this game is very interesting, and we see Mike discuss it after the challenge, where his strategy was just, I'm just going to go high enough with sixes so that it can never come back to me.
Which when he said that, I was like, okay, I'm glad that we got to hear that and have more reason other than them be like, I don't understand this, so let's just go to six.
Yeah. Because I do think there is a lot more nuance to the strategy in this game. I think there are times when it's better to increase the quantity of the dice rather than the quality of the dice. So rather than upping the number to from 5 threes to 5 sixes, it's more advantageous to go I think there are 7 threes, because then you're putting it into a position where it's now you're making people think, okay, do I have to move the quantity up or the quality up, and which one is more likely? It just adds a lot more thought process and strategy to the game. But Mike's strategy clearly pays off here.
Yeah, Sean, if you were in this game, would you have understand what was going on, or were you just been like, I don't know, man, 8
so believe it or
sevens?
Not, I have played this before, but okay. I do like the idea of work hard or smarter, not harder. So figuring out probability, for me, something either happens or it doesn't. It's 50-50, right? So just going to dodge all that, whatever, go up number. I don't want to have to figure it out. I don't want to have to know if there's 9 threes or 10 threes. I can just say sixes, and that's it. You keep going up from there. And yeah, I kind of agree with Mike, right? If you say a big number for 6, it's probably not going to come back around to you, right? So that's all that matters. If it doesn't come back to you, no one's going to challenge you, and you don't have to challenge them. Somebody else probably will down the line, hopefully. And then you just kind of just lie low. So.
Yeah, so Mike wins his 2nd straight immunity. Again, another competition where he's like, I had no reason to win this game, but here I am. So congrats to Mike for 2 individual immunity wins. It's well earned, really, on both of them. They weren't easy competitions to win. So congrats to you. We then see Mike go straight to McKenna and Victoria and say, old Zerpone is dead. One of you 2 is going home. And both of them are just like, why are we doing this call then? I love the brashness here. Once again, Mike is safe. Nothing can happen to him this round. So he's sort of like, I'm going to just tell him how it is.
This is an incredibly bold move from Mike, because it has so much potential just to backfire on him completely. And yes, he's safe here. And this is kind of what we were going on with the last episode, where people remember what you say. People are going to remember when you say, hey, you're going home.
The thing is, what makes this hilarious, and we'll get to it, is we start with this. This is the conversation happening between Mike, McKenna, and Victoria. And then we cut to right before 10 minutes before tribal council starting. We will get there. But it's just wow, what time, when you give them time to just talk, how did this come about? I'm still questioning, how did that event happen? Did it change the course of what was going to happen? No. But it was crazy. So
I don't get it. What's the move there? Why do that? I legitimately don't understand. Why would you do that?
I feel like Mike is someone who revels around chaos. Whereas while everyone else is in chaos and they're chickens with their heads cut off, you see him just slow, everything's in slow motion. This is the bliss. This is where I know everything that's happening around me because everyone else doesn't know. So it's sort of put people on edge. put people where like they start questioning things that they shouldn't be questioning, I think was ultimately where he was trying to go. But I also think a fatal flaw here was they have this back and forth between him and Jonathan. That's like, it's a cold war, so to speak, with them. Like they haven't actually fired at each other. Mike threw a vote at him, but it was just because he was pissed that they didn't get their way. But these people still believe that they can bring back Dworkin, that they can pull Jonathan in, like they're with us, like he won't vote against us. And Jonathan's in confessions just like, Mike thought he had these people. I have these people. So he doesn't have them. He wanted Margaret around because he thought he could have Margaret's number. That's another reason why I had to cut her out. Like Jonathan's just like this cold-blooded player. And I love that like back and forth between Mike and his chaos, and Jonathan's just like, his chaos doesn't work on me.
I don't even know if this was a chaotic move from Mike. This to me feels more like jury management. This feels like Mike being like, I know I have the numbers because I have Kiley, I have Will, they have Connor. All we need is one more person here, and like this is easy. And it's going to be one of you two going home because we've been talking about getting one of you original Serpones out for a long time, right? And he's presenting it in a way where he's trying to present it logically. It's like they want a Serpone gone. I can't go because I have immunity, so it has to be one of you two. And it feels like he's trying to. It feels like he's trying to present himself as like saving his own skin here and like forging his own way forward here, where he's making the logical decision. Mm-hmm. But he's just completely blinded by his hubris here that he thinks he has the numbers based on how everything's gone, despite the fact the flip they tried to perpetrate in the previous episode didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, that was my thing ultimately. I was like, how do you guys believe you have the power when you couldn't get the plan that you ultimately wanted done? Like all those people that you wanted to have in that plan are all still in this game. They all wanted to go one way. You ultimately put your tail between your legs, went with them. Begrudgingly. You didn't want to, but you did. It's fascinating. And that's what makes this episode's editing like it's chef's kiss. Like it's perfect. We now hear from Connor, someone we don't hear that often from, to John's dismay and his fancy drafts. But he's like, well, my plan to get Mike out finally is at his ears, even though Mike has known for a while now that Connor has wanted him out. But now Connor realizes that Mike knows. It's like, but he doesn't have the numbers. I don't think he has the numbers. I love this like sort of self-deprecation Connor does because it's similar to what I do, where he's like, okay, but I had this other thing potentially happening and I wanted McKenna out, but everyone that I want to work with now want Will and Kiley out, who I have a good relationship with. I don't trust them, but I have a good relationship with them. And then he's like, I think I'm in the power position. Not actually though. And that's how the confessional ends. I'm just like, that Connor, you have gave us a lot, and yet you think you have nothing. Where are we? But it's like the song, he was in a like, it's not like the power position that some people want, but it is a power position where his ultimate decision to go in a way or having people feel he'll go a certain way is a factor in how this vote ends up. Mm-hmm. And it's like something that he should take note of because it could be something useful if he were to get to the end.
Yeah, both sides thought they had Connor, and only one of those things is true. And it is powerful to be in that spot, to be the person that each team relies on you. Like you're my fifth. We need you to be the majority here. And if you know that too, that's insane. I think really powerful to have, especially
in this position where it's a choice between voting someone out and rocks. Like you are setting
rocks.
You are setting battle lines here, and you are drawing that line in the sand, and you're saying, this is how this season is going to go from now on.
Right. So now we see this 4 now being mentioned, and it's that final 3 of Michael, Victoria, and Jonathan all together, but also with Connor, which Connor has also pitched around all of them already planning, like, this is the 4 that we want. It's interesting because it, once again, is showing while McKenna was and still is currently in a good spot, like, they aren't including her in that final 4. Because now, like, a lot of them, and Connor's like the big proponent of this, is like the people that aren't in this 4 are the ones that we think if they get to the end, they would have a better chance of winning. Which it's sort of fun seeing the people who figured themselves to be the underdogs to actually all come together, because we see time and time again these games where the underdogs who recognize that they're underdogs but do not come together to then become the majority, which is what Jonathan pitches. And he's like, this 5 right here, we have the control. Do we really want them to have the control and like quote unquote bully their way? He didn't mean them being bullies, but like pushing their weight around to get what they wanted done. Or do we just say, fuck it, no one tell Will, we're gonna vote Will out. I don't give a shit. If it's Kiley, once again, I don't give a shit. But let's take one of them out right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was a good idea for Connor to adapt at this point. I mean, I'm talking about adaptability so much at this point, and that's because we're seeing a change in the game at this point. One thing I really noticed in episode 10, we saw a lot more change in confessional discussion from people, these are people I am keeping in the game because I can work with, to these are people I need to get out of the game because they are a threat to me winning the game. We're at that point now in the season where that evaluation is completely changing. And the way people are looking at these votes is completely different. So you have to adapt your game. The fact that we're seeing so many different players adapt how they're approaching the game at this point isn't because they decided all of a sudden, oh, I'm not paying attention to the game and I need to start doing so. It's because the game's forcing them to adapt, because everyone is changing the way they're looking at the game.
Yeah. And like, I think the big reason why this group for now is working better than the threesome of Will, Mike, and Kiley is this group, although all coming together for a joint cause, are all playing, for the most part, individualistic games. Like, all these things are hidden in self-interest, where John is like, I want this group together because I see people in here I could beat if I bring them to the end with me. Victoria's thinking similar, but also has her loyalties attached. Connor's thinking in a self, just like, be self-sufficient, like figure out a way to keep surviving each round and get to the end. Like, we have all these reasonings here. Whereas we see it in here, Mike's like, the goal here is we need to create something now so that we protect you two, but ultimately so that I can be protected next round when I know for a fact I'm most likely not winning immunity for a 3rd straight time. So I think the issue here is, while they're all thinking individualistically for a majority of that group, this group is still too intact. How do we keep all 3 of us safe? Mm-hmm. Whereas they are all like, who's the person we take out? They're, how do we all remain? And I think it's easier to get an action plan going when you are in a point of offense rather than a point of defense.
Well, especially with 8 people left, if you're the 3, like, too bad. It's, you can't really come back from that, right? If those 5 people are going to stick together and just pick you off one by one, then that's it. Unfortunately, you have to pull somebody at that point. Which, and I mean,
we're really seeing the outfall, or like the fallout of the last vote, and them not being able to get their way. If we like even just look at the vote breakdown from episode 9, where Will still gets a vote, Mike throws the hinky vote on Jonathan, and all the other votes go on Margaret. The fact that Margaret's voting Will there makes literally 0 sense. If there was a plan to vote out Michael, Margaret should have been included in that plan.
And I think that's a big flaw in like what they're doing, because like they didn't loop in Margaret, or Margaret just didn't believe them or want to work with them. So she's like, I'm still just going to throw my vote at Will and hope the other side votes Will instead of me. Here again, Will talks about in his final words that he thought he had Connor. Where was Connor in all these group calls? He wasn't there. So it's like, how can you rely, like they had this, like, it's, I wouldn't even call it hubris. I would just say that they had this preconceived notion that Connor would roll with them, that Jonathan would be willing enough to not vote for them and maybe just go somewhere else, and then they could still control. So it was just like they just didn't have all the information. Like we see that in the current season of Survivor 42. Like we had decisions that people were trying to make, and when confronted with like, you don't have all the information, but nah, I do. And then they find out they don't. Like half my notes are Kiley, Mike, and Will make this plan. They think they have the numbers. They don't. They think this plan will happen. It won't. Like they have all these people. They still don't. Like it's like half my notes are just that the entire episode. And it's like I feel for them because I do think they are good game players. It was just like it goes to show like even people that are good at the game or good at certain components of the game can still be caught off guard. Like there's no such thing as like the perfect omniscient player that can always know what the audience knows, that production knows. Like in our head, we're all like, well, why can't they see this? Why can't they do that? And ultimately we have to take that step back and be like, we have all the information.
Yeah.
They don't. So it's sort of fascinating to see this episode go through because if this is the result of people not having all the information necessary to make a counteraction plan.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make in this situation that they're in, and I think it does come down to Connor. I think Connor is a very linchpin as to how this kind of went wrong for them. And I'm going to take it from my personal experience. When I started Exile Island and I saw Connor out there and I knew he was on my tribe, the first person I contacted on that season was Connor. Because my immediate thought was, this is a 17-year-old kid who is just going to want to feel included. We're a year past that at this point. Connor has experience in these games, but a mistake some people can make in these games when they're looking at a cast and they're evaluating the people they're playing against is they can take age into consideration.
Yeah.
Connor being so young is a detriment to him in some ways, but also an advantage to him in some ways. And in this case, it's an advantage to him because these players, these seasoned players, these players who have an understanding of the game, who are very good game players in Mike and Kiley and Will, they're making the mistake that because Connor is young, he's not out there making enough connections to be working with other people. And they just think that they have him and they've pulled him in and that he won't go anywhere because it makes more sense for him to stick with them from their standpoint. They're not putting in the effort to uphold that relationship in a way so that he does remain loyal in this place.
And like we see that in his like in the voting booth where he's just like, this isn't what I wanted to have happen, but people got in their own way. And now I can't do anything to protect these potential pieces that I wanted to play with moving forward. So we see more of this. We see more of the Final Four being talked about. Victoria, I think, has some insightful stuff where she says she thinks Jonathan's playing the best game, and she's jealous that he can get away with just being unnecessarily blunt with people, and like they won't target him for it. And where that could be a reason why they have targeted other people in the past. It's sort of a reason why they targeted Nick, was just like he was blunt and he was just all over the place. But she also says she thinks Michael's starting to like his stock is starting to rise. It's sort of similar to Sahara Dunes. We're seeing it's sort of funny seeing it come back to back and him playing a similar style and having similar results so far. So that's fun. And ultimately, again, we hear that McKenna is dangerous. And Victoria says she's playing okay. Once again, downgrading her own abilities because I think she has been playing very well. And it's shown because 10 minutes before Tribal, Mike approaches McKenna and says, everyone is voting for you. They aren't, but in his mind, everyone's voting for McKenna. So McKenna's at least aware that some votes are going against her. And another piece of notes here, up to this point in the game, McKenna's one of the few people, or maybe the only person left in the game that had not received a vote cast against her.
Connor hasn't at this point either.
You're right. Connor hasn't as well. I think those are the only two left in the final 8 that has never had a vote cast against them. And I think at this point, McKenna was like, this is something that could be on my resume. So now I have this information. And she's like, I don't like doing this, but what if I gave you guys a name? Like, is there any possibility we can do something together again? And Mike gives her the olive branch. He goes, hey, if you bring 5 people in and you bring Kiley, myself, Will, and Victoria in, the 2 people that he said were going home, regardless of what happened, we can make this happen. So that room gets created. McKenna gives the pitch of like, it could be Michael. Like, would you guys be on board with this? And Will's the first one to really say like, yeah, I would prefer that, because Will's still on the, I want to take out all these OG weekends minus Kiley. But what I found fascinating here was the inclusion of Victoria in this and not Connor. I think if you added Connor into this 5 at this point, I think it could have shaken him a little bit. I think it's possible, like maybe not the Michael plan itself, but I think there's a world where you bring him in instead of Victoria, who will never switch the plan. Connor may have.
I don't think Mike realized that, though. I think Mike thought of this as, okay, this is Serpone getting together with these other 2 people that I'm working with that I've already told them it's better for me to work with moving forward. So I think what this is Mike realizing, okay, well, I have this relationship with McKenna and Victoria from Serpone. I've told them they're going home. And I've told them that I'm working with Will and Kiley from now on. So in getting this 5 together, it does make sense. I think the problem is they don't realize that Victoria and McKenna have already put the work in to make sure that Will's going home at this point.
But like, what's crazy now is not only did they put in the work to take out Will, they have now managed to get the vote off of again in our original Serpone. And like, Sean, I want to hear from you here. Like, what did you think of this move that McKenna ultimately like was able to pull off to get the votes off of her, even though like she was like, because there's a world where there's a worldview where like anyone could have an advantage, anyone could have an idol. No one other than Jonathan knows that Victoria has that idol, and she knows if something weird happened and Will gets saved, if Connor gets cold feet and places idol or 50-50 coin on Will and it hits, I go home. And so she was able to take advantage of an opportunity to ensure that vote doesn't land on her.
Well, that was the nice thing about it. This opportunity kind of just landed in her lap, right? Like she was brought in for a conversation, say, hey, what do you think about this person? And that person wasn't her. So she's like, yep, let's go. That sounds wonderful. I would love to vote with you. So then the backup plan of if the Will thing doesn't work for whatever reason, or if immunity was brought into play, then the target gets moved to Michael. So it worked out like perfectly, like just absolutely perfectly for her.
This is the result of what McKenna was talking about last episode, where she remained on both sides of everything and she remained agreeable to everything. Because of that, Mike viewed her as someone who would just agree with whatever plan there, especially one that made it so that she didn't go home. This is all of McKenna's hard work here. And it's so impressive how she was able to navigate these 2 rounds, because her name was out there a lot. And being able to come out of these 2 rounds without a single vote cast against her is incredibly impressive. The big question I have about this entire conversation: did Mike prep Will and Kiley for it before the 5 got together? Like, did Mike go to them and be like, hey, I'm going to pitch this Michael plan? Because it kind of, based on like how Kiley's voting confessional, it seemed like that wasn't the case. But knowing Mike is working so close with Will and Kiley, does he try to change the vote last minute without keying them in beforehand?
I think it's possible that is that. Like, I'll probably hear from Mike after this gets posted, and I'll get an explanation on what happened. But I would probably think it again ultimately goes to that plan that he had of like, we need to create some sort of majority where you both get saved. and it benefits us the next round where any of us three are a target. And I think he ended up going to a place of comfort where, yes, did he lash out at McKenna and Victoria and like say like you're going home like to them? Like, yes. But ultimately, they are two people that he worked very closely with on the side of that other three. And he probably thought, if I can get them just to buy it for a round, like we will be set. Like we will get past this round, we'll get past the next round, and then we'll have control. And then we can get rid of McKenna, get rid of Victoria. I also think ultimately they probably picked McKenna as the vote because one, they may have seen her as a bigger threat, or two, they thought Victoria was the one most likely to have an advantage if there was one out there. But we see Kiley sort of like Charlie Daying it with the like, there was this advantage, there was this advantage, there was this advantage. This one got played, this one got taken out, this one got played. We don't know if someone got this one. There was this other thing that someone had to have gotten. So there's probably like 3 at final 8 still here. Like I'm scared as hell right now that's what takes me out. So I loved that confessional because it brought some humor to a rather like intense episode of just like big strict gameplay, faction warfare. Like we'd see Will get blindsided in that 5-3 vote. There's nothing more, as an Australian survivor once said, like the only humane way to take someone out is in a blindside. And we got to have a couple good blindsides this season, and this one was probably the biggest so far.
At least for Will. From a viewer perspective, this was the easiest 5-3 I have ever seen in my life. And I don't consider myself the most adept survivor person out there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I would say for a viewer perspective, yeah, you see what's coming. From a player perspective, like you only know so much going in. Like you want to have that confidence.
I don't know anything, so.
Yeah. I won't argue that. But that does ultimately wrap up episodes 9 and 10. Some things to note here. Once again, it happened in Exile, but it gets beaten here. This is the longest streak of one tribe who had the majority going into the merge, being the only people to lose members of that tribe in the first 4 rounds of the post-merge game. Ruken had this super majority at final 11, and 4 Ruken are on the jury. All 4 Serpone people are still in the game and now outnumber the remaining Ruken at final 7 as we head into next week. I just found that just as like a little nerdy moment for me. I found that fascinating. Gotta trust people. If Sean was there, they needed Sean there to keep Ruken together.
I mean, look what happened to me though. So maybe I shouldn't have trusted people. Unwavered trust into everyone saying goodbye, Sean. Have a good one. So.
Oh yeah, you can't trust anyone, but you gotta trust somebody. Is what we learn in these Survivor games. But it's now time for us to head into our MVPs. I will announce. The audience has voted, and for episodes 7 and 8, the audience MVP was McKenna. So that gives her second MVP, a big tie across the board with 2 MVPs. We have a couple people with 3 MVPs, a couple people with 1 MVP, several with 0. So let's see what happens tonight. For episodes 9 and 10, John, who is your MVP?
Well, I'm here to push McKenna up to that 3 MVPs because I think McKenna played an absolutely phenomenal game this round. Not only her ability to adapt and her social awareness in the game, utilizing her social connections to remain in the middle of 2 groups for as long as possible, then ultimately choosing the group that came out on top in both of these votes. And if anything, I have to give McKenna MVP strictly for the composure she had in her conversations with Mike in episode 10. Because I tell you, in that, well, we all know how I would react in that type of situation. It's nothing like how McKenna reacted. Absolutely commendable. 100% MVP for these 2 episodes.
Solid choice. Sean, Who is your MVP?
So while I agree with Victoria that I think Jonathan is playing the best game, he is running the show. He's playing very smart. There's one thing better than being smart, and that is winning. And one person won not one challenge, but won 2 challenges. So my MVP goes to Mike because he won both challenges. Full stop.
I love it. I love it. Nothing went his way, but he did gain his safety ultimately. I love it. That's the fun part of these MVPs. It's all in the eye of the beholder. So that's one extra MVP for Mike. I got one for McKenna. I'm sort of glad you didn't go with McKenna so that I could go for McKenna because I hate clean sweeps. I had McKenna already written down on my spreadsheet. McKenna gets it for me. Once again, her composure for these 2 rounds, fantastic. She has enough self-awareness to both see she was in a good position as well as understanding why that can make her a threat, and was ultimately able to get the opposition, who all were dead set on voting for her, to not write her name down, still goes into final 7 with 0 votes cast against her. Does she have a lot of runway left? I'm not sure, just because we're seeing these things being made without her. But I have faith in her to be able to keep this composure going. And there's room. But for this specific week in a box, I have to give it to her. Jonathan was also a close call just because of him really starting to become that leader of that underdog alliance that isn't an underdog alliance anymore. And I think people are starting to take notice. So the only worry I would have there is, are people taking notice and then suddenly they're like, Jonathan's the Mike and Will now. Jonathan's the one who needs to go. Whereas I feel like McKenna may still have that wiggle room. So I'm going to go with McKenna. So with that puts McKenna in the lead with 4 MVPs. Andrew and Jonathan have 3 MVPs apiece, as well now as Mike. So Mike is in a 3-way tie for second with 3 MVPs. Then with 2 MVPs, we have Will, Victoria, and with 1 MVP, Kiley and Connor. We're getting to the end game, folks. There's only going to be a few more MVPs to hand out. So this is now really important for the audience to keep voting. Give us your MVP for this week. We'll read them next Sunday at the recaps for the next episodes. And that wraps up our time here. So from all of us here, please follow us on all of our social media. You'll see that at the end of this video for all of our handles for our Instagram, our TikTok. Definitely use our Instagram. We'll be posting for you to post your or answer who your MVP of this week was. If you aren't part of our Facebook page, join it, Dynamic Character Productions. You'll be able to know when all of our new videos are dropping, as well as ask questions for our exit interviews that air on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Obviously, our episodes air on Mondays and Thursdays, and recaps every Sunday. This has been a hell of a week. Thank you, John. Thank you, Sean. I'm out from Dynamic Character Productions. We will see you next time.